Hello, and welcome to another edition of Senior Soundings. I'm your host, Gerry LePage, and we're delighted to have you joining us today. Also joining us today, I'm delighted to introduce you to Christopher Butler, who is the Executive Director of Insight. And that is a program that serves the needs of people with vision impairments throughout the state. So Chris, welcome. It's great to have you on board. And why don't we just start, first of all, maybe tell us a little bit about your own background and how you became involved with Insight.
I think, like a lot of folks who work in the nonprofit field, it kind of happened by accident. Most kids don't go to college and say, I really want a career in the nonprofit world. I kind of stumbled into it. I was always very active when I was a teenager and throughout college in the community. When I graduated from college, I didn't really have a direction in mind. I had a communications degree and a marketing degree. I had a friend of mine who was working at the American Cancer Society at the time and said, hey, we're hiring fundraisers. Why don't you come on board? And I did. And I've been in nonprofits ever since, almost 35, 40 years. Wow. Yeah, it's a long time. But I really love the work. I've actually worked at Insight twice. I worked at Insight in the mid to late 1990s doing community outreach and volunteer management and education types of stuff. I left to do some other things. I came back to Insight 19 years ago as the executive director, which is a long time, especially in nonprofit terms. You tend to see a lot of turnover in nonprofits. We have a very stable staff. Folks really like the work that we do. We like the people that we serve, and it's interesting work. And it's always changing, which keeps things exciting.
Absolutely, yes. So tell us a little bit more about Insight itself now. What kind of services it provides, and what do you see in your day-to-day work with vision impaired people? What are some of maybe the emotional aspects of vision impairment and so on?
Sure. Yeah, we're celebrating our 100th anniversary this year, so we're 100 years old. The beginning of the agency actually even goes back further to the early 1900s, but we officially incorporated in 1925 as the Rhode Island Association for the Blind, changed our name in the mid-1980s to Insight. Mission has stayed pretty much the same for those whole 100 years. Obviously, the programs and the services have changed a lot over 100 years, but the core mission has remained the same, which is we want folks who are living with visual impairments to be as independent and confident as possible. There shouldn't be any restrictions, either self-imposed or society-imposed restrictions on what people with disabilities can and cannot do. We want people with visual impairments to feel like they can go out and be fully participatory in their community and their families and their lives, to work, to travel, to garden, to paint, to do all the things that people with normal sight do. The agency today, I think, is really kind of divided into two parts. One is what you would expect that we would do, which is kind of helping people with the practical aspects of a visual impairment. So you have diminished vision. I should say we work with people from 6 months old up to 106 years old, so the full range of folks. But most vision loss is age-related. So unfortunately, the fact is that if we all live long enough, probably every single one of us will have some kind of vision issue, whether it's cataracts or macular degeneration or glaucoma or diabetic retinopathy. All of us will have diminished vision as we get older. So if you've lived most of your life with fairly normal vision, or maybe just wearing corrective lenses, and now all of a sudden 50, 60, 70, 80% of your vision is gone, it obviously has significant practical effects. You probably can't drive anymore. It's much harder to read a book, or to go to the supermarket and identify products, or to see your grandchildren's artwork. So those are kind of the practical aspects. And we can help people with all of those things. And there's lots of technology, lots of tools, lots of creative things folks can do to kind of overcome those practical challenges. I think the other part of the agency, and the part that I think is the hardest, and you touched on this, is the emotional aspects of vision loss. And that is the hardest part of the work that we do. I think for all of us who work in social services, it's the hardest part of what we do, because you're really trying to get people to accept the fact that they have had this significant change in their life, and it's going to change almost every aspect of their day-to-day, their relationships, their daily routine, everything kind of gets turned on its head. And there is, unfortunately, we've come a long way in the way we think about people with disabilities, especially from 1925 to 2025.
Sure.
But even today, in 2025, there is a stigma attached to having a disability, to being visually impaired. And most of us don't want that stigma attached to us, so we do everything we can to hide it from ourselves, from our families, from our doctors, from the people that we care about. So, it's hard to get people through that process of acknowledging their visual impairment, accepting their visual impairment, developing the tools and strategies to work through it. We all have bad days. I have bad days, you have bad days, everyone in the audience has bad days. But hopefully you can develop some tools and strategies so that when you're having those bad days, you get through it pretty quickly. And so we spend a lot of time, things that you would think we would do: support groups, individual counseling, workshops. We offer programs where we just get people together with other folks who have visual impairments just to have fun. Let's not be in a support group and dwell on our visual impairment. Let's do yoga. Let's do a book club. Let's do ceramics. Let's do crafts. Let's take a trip, to Newport, to Sakonnet Vineyards, and do a tour of the vineyard and a wine tasting. So we try to incorporate a lot of those activities that help people with that emotional adjustment process. But that is the most difficult piece of what we do. We also provide services to caregivers. I think that's become an increasingly bigger part of what we do.
Right.
Because we realize that, for folks who are elderly, their adult children are concerned, their spouses, and when somebody in the family has a visual impairment, it affects everybody in the family.
Yes.
Because now if you can't drive, somebody else has to drive. If you don't feel confident, you don't have the skills and the tools yet to go to the supermarket and do the weekly grocery shopping, well, somebody else is doing that. If you haven't developed the skills to make sure the bills are being paid and the checkbook's being balanced, somebody else is taking on that role. And so everybody, is kind of involved in that process. And again, as a caregiver, you have days where you just feel like, I've had enough. I can't do this. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know. We're not communicating well. And so we also try to help people develop those tools and strategies. So hopefully it's a comprehensive set of services. Having said that, there are also other agencies throughout the state, other nonprofits that work with our population. And we refer out a lot, we collaborate a lot, we want people to go to their local senior centers, we want people to go to the CAP agencies, we want people, because it's not typically just their vision that's an issue. They may be having hearing issues and physical issues and social issues and financial issues, and so we want to make sure we can't solve everybody's problems, but if we can work together in a comprehensive system, so we work hard to do that too.
And I think, what you mentioned about being part of that network of service agencies that assist with some of the specific issues that you might be identifying, perhaps a mental health issue or just someone who is in need of more food and either can't afford it or can't get to it. So coordinating with other agencies that provide those kinds of supports, and to the extent that it involves the caregivers as well, because that's a point you brought up, I think that's really so important, is that when someone, whatever impairment it is, whether it's a vision impairment or just a serious health issue, that need to, and a sudden need very frequently, it comes up right fast, and to have to bring in family members or neighbors and other people to help out, just bringing together a support network can be quite a substantial undertaking. So for a person to have an agency like Insight to help them find the other supports that they need is so important. So good job there.
It is. It's very challenging, and I often tell people it is. completely overwhelming because vision loss isn't something that most of us ever think about. Right. So most people watching the show have probably never heard of Insight. Have never really given any thought to people with visual impairments or what it would be like if you had a visual impairment. Right. And when you're suddenly thrust into that world, and there's a book that I refer people to a lot, and in the book, the author talks about the trauma of having a visual impairment, and he says it's like you're walking down the street on a nice sunny day, and all of a sudden you get hit by a bolt of lightning. Like the last thing you would expect to happen on a sunny day is to get hit by a bolt of lightning and thrown to the ground. Right. But that's what it feels like when you go to the optometrist or the ophthalmologist and he says, I hate to tell you, but you have macular degeneration or you have glaucoma and your vision is restricted and you're not going to be able to drive anymore. And it hits like a thunderbolt and you don't know where to go and where to turn. And you might start Googling things or you may even go to the Insight website and just become completely overwhelmed by everything that's available. And so we really try, in those initial conversations we have with folks to center it on, what's one meaningful thing that we could work on. Right. And then let's build from there because there's so much to know and so many resources and so many tools. And again, it can become very overwhelming, and it can become very overwhelming for the caregivers as well, because they're in their own emotional headspace. We have had family members who are in complete denial, who don't believe that their loved one has a visual impairment, or it's as bad as they're making it out to be, or that they couldn't drive if they really wanted to. And then we have other family members who go completely the opposite direction, and they smother. I'm going to do everything for you because you can't do anything for yourself anymore. So So it helping them navigate that happy medium of what is the right level of support, and making sure that the person with the visual impairment, that you're not taking away their independence, you're not taking away their self-confidence, and we all want to be as independent as possible, but be safe. And it's a lot. It requires a lot of teamwork, and absolutely sometimes in relationships, especially when you think about being married for 40, 50, 60, sometimes you lose that. You just kind of lose the ability to communicate with each other, and you lose the ability, and something like this happens, and it exposes all of that.
I think it's like it's a life-changing event. So even the vernacular, the language you use to speak back and forth to your spouse, it's something that over 40 years or so, you've developed a kind of a code between the two of you, but when the needs suddenly change that dramatically, there's no language in the code, and so that can lead to miscommunications, misunderstandings, and the like. And so as the agency that's there working, trying to draw all these moving parts together to be a working solution for the person who needs the assistance, is a very multifaceted and complicated process.
Incredibly. One of my favorite stories, when I first came back to Insight 19 years ago, we were working with a nonprofit consultant who's trying to help us figure out, my predecessor had been at Insight for almost 30 years. So, when I came, we said, now's the time to kind of open the drapes and let some sunlight in and maybe do things a little bit differently, but we needed help figuring that out. So we brought in a consultant. We did a bunch of focus groups with clients and families and community partners, and we did one focus group that was family members. So it was a client and typically their spouse. And we asked them, what were they looking for from Insight? What did they need? What has their experience been like? And this one particular couple, the woman who did all the talking in the relationship. The husband was very quiet, but the wife, she talked a lot. So she talked about, her visual impairment and her journey and all this kind of stuff. And the facilitator, the consultant we were working with, turned to the husband and said, well, Harold, what has this been like for you? And I remember it like it was yesterday. He just sat there and he took in this really deep breath, and then he let it out and he said, this has been so hard. He said, because, when I was working, I get to the last couple of years that I had to work, and retirement was in sight, and I really didn't enjoy what I was doing for a living, but I knew I needed to work financially. But I kept saying 2 more years, just 18 more months, 12 more months. I had this countdown, and I kept saying to myself, when I retire, I'm going to go golfing 4 times a week. Because, when you're working, you really can't go golfing during the week, and the courses are so busy on the weekends, and no one's available. So when I retire, I'm going to have all the time in the world to go to the golf course in the morning and golf all morning and hang out with the guys in the afternoon. And, a week before I retired, she lost her vision. That's exactly how he said it. She lost her vision.
Yep.
And so Jane, the consultant, said, well, Harold, how many times have you been golfing since you retired? He said, I haven't.
Yeah.
And she said, well, why not? And he said, I can't leave her alone. How can I leave her alone? She can hardly see. What would happen if she fell and couldn't get up? What would happen if she went to go use the stove and there was a fire and she couldn't get out of the house? I can't leave her alone. And his wife, Irene, turned to him and said, oh my God, Harold, you drive me crazy. I want you to get out of the house. I want you to go golfing because you're absolutely miserable. They were kind of like fighting it out in front of all of us.
Oh my.
But they had been married a really long time, and they had never had that conversation. And after that, we followed up with them, and we ended up teaching Irene some skills that she could use. We got how about a medical alert? In case you do fall, you can call somebody for help.
Right.
Here's how to dial the phone. Here's how to use the microwave safely, and maybe stay away from the stove when Harold's not around. And then we gave him some skills, and eventually he did end up going out a couple of times a week to golf and leaving her alone. And they had their own personal space, and but that. It shows you just how complicated it can be. And as I said, I think sometimes the longer we're in relationships, we kind of forget how to communicate because we fall into a pattern. You do this and I do that, and we kind of go our own ways, and we get together at the end of the day, and how was your day? Fine. How was your day? Fine. We just kind of lose that ability to say, I need this, and it's hard without somebody kind of from the outside sometime coming in and helping you develop those skills again and rediscovering it. So.
And that's really the importance of agencies like yours and mine, really, is the fact that, we are there to support whatever the person needs, to evaluate what they need and help them find the help they need.
And I think, being able to ask for help is very important. And that's hard. It's hard for me. I tell clients stories all the time about times in my life, whether it's been issues with my kids or issues with my own health, where I just say, oh, it'll be fine. Let's see what it's like tomorrow. It's hard. It takes a lot to reach out, especially when you see yourself as very independent and confident and pull yourself up by your bootstraps, to make a phone call to an agency and say, I think I need to talk to somebody. I think I need some help. Or
that is a big,
swallow it and come to a support group or come to a workshop. Or it's really, really hard. But if you can get over that mountain, there's so many benefits on the other side. You really can rediscover things, I think.
Please, viewers, pay attention. Chris is offering some really good advice there. If you have an issue of some kind, whether it's a vision impairment or whatever it is, do reach out. Do ask for help. We do have an information helpline. Basically, all you have to dial is 211, and that is the Point, which is the Rhode Island Office of Healthy Aging, their central information hub for any kind of information or referral that you might need. So 211. And I'm sure Insight is among the many resources that you would be pointed to depending on your need. So, Chris, we have some time left. Maybe we can talk a little bit about, you mentioned earlier on how you are able to offer technology and some technological solutions to vision impairment problems. And then maybe a little bit about what's happening as far as research into vision impairments and what do you see in the future?
I think the technology is really exciting. Technology has really changed the ability of people with visual impairments to be active in the community. When I came back to Insight 19 years ago, we had one person on staff who was blind, and that was our receptionist. And basically all she did was answer the phone, and then she took messages in Braille, and then she would read our messages in Braille. We couldn't have people who were blind that working as social workers or independent, because everything we did was on paper. We had paper files for everybody, lesson plans was from paper, everything was on paper. Today, we have a number of people on staff who are blind and visually impaired because everything we do is electronic. And so they have equal access to everything we do because all of our client records, everything we do is electronic, which makes it accessible to folks with visual impairments. I did a class yesterday about a new type of technology called smart glasses. The most popular ones that are out there now are made by Ray-Ban and Meta. They're available at LensCrafters, Target, Walmart, Amazon, just about anywhere you can get glasses. But they're glasses that have cameras in the corners. They have a microphone in the arm, and then they have speakers in both arms. And it uses artificial intelligence, so you can stick the glasses on, and you could say, "Hey Meta, tell me what I'm looking at," and it would describe the scene, that's there. You could hold up a piece of paper and say, "Hey Meta, what is this?" and it will read it to you. I took the Insight electrical bill the other day, and I put the glasses on. I held the bill up. I said, "Hey Meta, what am I holding?" And it said, "It's an electric bill from Rhode Island Energy." I said, "Well, how much is it?" And it said, $1,320. So it gave me the amount. It'll make and receive phone calls and read you your text messages, and you can ask it questions like you do with Alexa devices or Siri devices. So those kinds of things make a huge impact because now somebody wearing glasses like that, one of the big complaints I get from folks is I go to Subway or I go to Dunkin' Donuts and the menu is up, high up behind the counter. I can't see it to read it. But now with these glasses, I could, certainly now I could hold up my phone, take a picture of it, use the AI on my phone. But now I can just do it through my glasses. I don't have to pull out a phone. I have to do anything like that. So there's lots of that really amazing technology that's available now. Even more exciting stuff in the pipeline with artificial intelligence. So it's harder, I think, for folks who are older to kind of get their heads around. My 9-year-old can take my phone, completely reprogram it in about 30 seconds. My mom, it takes a little bit longer, to figure out the technology. But we do offer a lot of workshops, a lot of classes that help people find out what some of this technology is. The technology is not for everybody. There's no one tool that helps everybody. But at least knowing what's out there, then we can teach how to use it, make the most of it. So I think that's really important. I think with research, there's a lot of really exciting research that's happening. A lot of it's actually happening right up the road at Mass Eye and Ear in Boston. There's a lot of research dollars that flows into Mass Eye and Ear. The eye is a very, very complicated organ. It's very, very complicated to dissect. It's really only been in the last 30 or 40 years that researchers have really even figured out how the eye works, how the retina works, and the optic nerve, and how our brain takes these electrical impulses and turns them into images. Having said that, in the last 7-8 years, we've seen there's now a treatment for people with dry macular degeneration. There's now a new treatment that's only been out for about a year for people with wet macular degeneration. Lots of treatments now for folks with glaucoma. So we're definitely getting a better understanding of how the eye works, how some of these eye diseases affect the eye, how we can at least pause the progression of some of these diseases. There's not a cure, but we can at least, in a lot of cases, stop it from getting worse if you catch it in time. And I think there is a lot of hope when I've gone to seminars and research roundtables and YouTube videos. I think there is a lot of hope, maybe not in my lifetime, but in my kids' lifetime. I do think a lot of visual impairments will be curable or preventable. I think we'll know enough about how the eye works to be able to cut off some of the eye damage before it ever happens.
Right.
I think for the viewers, one very important thing that they can do starting today is whenever you are outside to wear sunglasses, or I have transition glasses. When I go outside, the lenses darken as soon as the UV hits it. The research really is now pointing to a lot of cataracts, or the severity of the cataracts that folks get is from sun damage. Just think about an entire lifetime of being outside, having that UV light come into your eye and hitting the lens. So researchers really think that a lot of the problems folks have with cataracts as they get older, is at least in part related to damage from the sun. Macular degeneration, increasingly more research that suggests that some macular degeneration is being caused by, again, that lifetime of exposure to the sun. So it's never too late to start. When you go outside, pop on the sunglasses. That prevents some of that damage from being able to happen. Kale, spinach, collards, all the green leafy vegetables that my kids refuse to eat are extremely good for your eyes. They have the vitamins and minerals that have been shown to really help your retina stay healthy. And if you're outside, you're doing yard work, always having something on your face, whether it's sunglasses, goggles, regular glasses. We do have clients who unfortunately have been hit by a rock that came up from the lawnmower, or the branch, that just kind of came out of nowhere and hit them just right. So your eyes are very important. Anything you can do to protect them means not smoking, eating right, wearing your sunglasses outside, always wearing protective eyewear. Those things will go a long way to making sure that your eyes stay healthy. And probably the most important, anybody over the age of 50 really should be having an annual eye exam. I always say to folks, it seems like, when I hit my 50s, prior to being 50, I had one doctor. I went to my primary care once a year. You look great. You're very healthy. As soon as I turned 50, it was like, now I have this doctor, that, a dermatologist, and a virologist, and a this, and a that. I look at my mother's calendar. She's in her late 70s. It's doctor appointment, doctor appointment, doctor appointment. So if you don't have, you're not wearing glasses, you might say, oh, God, another doctor? Why do I have to go to another doctor? A lot of these eye diseases that I mentioned show no symptoms for a long time. You can have macular degeneration or glaucoma or diabetic retinopathy for a long time and just very, 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 very slowly be losing your vision. Just so slowly that you don't even notice it. Then all of a sudden you go to the eye doctor and that's when they say, oh, you've lost a substantial amount of vision. So if you're going to an eye doctor once a year, it's quick in and out. Typically it's like a half hour, very quick and painless. They're going to see that stuff long before you're ever recognizing the symptoms. And if you can catch, like every other disease, if you can catch it early, you have a lot more options when it comes to treatment and learning about some of these technologies and skills and tools that'll make that emotional adjustment much easier, when you get to that point.
Well, it goes to the old adage, right, about an ounce of prevention provides a pound of cure, right? Something like that, yes. So, well, Chris, we have just a little bit of time left. Thanks so much for coming on, and why don't you just tell our viewers how they can get in touch with you and with Insight to find out more about the services that you offer?
Sure. I think a great place to start is our website. That's in-sight.org. We have lots of information right there. When you come onto the homepage, it says Living with Vision Loss, we can help. There's a button that says Start Here. Click that button, gives you a whole list of resources and things to think about. So I think that's a great place to start. You can give us a call, 401-941-3322. We're happy to talk to you or your family members or your friends about what is available. We do host on a monthly basis, we do a workshop called Understanding Vision Loss, which is a very broad overview of some of the things that we talked about today, some things to think about, kind of thinking about a roadmap of what should my next steps be. Great thing about Understanding Vision Loss is we give you a free lunch. So we give you a box lunch. So you put up with us for an hour and a half or so of talking to you about stuff and engaging you in conversation, but then we also give you lunch. So it's a great opportunity to get information, and that's open to anybody, family, friends, neighbors, caregivers, folks who work in other nonprofits or allied professions, and we love to talk about this, as you can tell. We love to talk about this stuff.
Come back and see us again for another episode of Senior Soundings. So long.